There are soldiers, and then there are Gurkhas. For over 2 centuries, the world's greatest empires have whispered the same words. If a Gurkha is coming for you, pray. Armed with a curved blade older than some civilizations, forged by mountains that swallowed the weak, and trained through rituals that look more like survival than military selection, the Gurkhas did not earn their reputation through stories. They earned it with bodies, victories, and legends. This is not just the story of an army. It is the story of a people carved by stone, sharpened by hardship, and feared by enemies who learned too late why the word Gurkha still sends a chill through any battlefield historian. Tonight, you will see why they became the most badass warriors on earth, high in the Himalayas. Where air thins and life clings to cliffs, a culture was born that believed suffering is not something to escape, but something to master. While most armies trained in fields, these warriors trained in ravines, forests, freezing winds, and impossible slopes. Every breath was resistance training. Every mile was a test. Every hardship was preparation for war they didn't even know would come. For centuries, Nepal remained isolated, untouched by the world's kingdoms. But violence brewed within its hills, tribal conflicts, rival clans, and civil wars forged a people who learned that survival required more than strength. It required unyielding will. Out of these mountains rose a kingdom called Gurkha, and out of Gurkha rose warriors whose fearlessness would one day shock the British Empire itself. This video will take you across 300 years. From hidden Himalayan villages to world wars, jungle ambushes, bayonet charges, and modern special operations. You will meet men who fought 35,000 enemies with fewer than 600 defenders. Men who ran up mountains carrying 35 kg baskets as teenagers, and men who, even today, are chosen through trials that would break elite soldiers worldwide. The Gurkhas were not built in training camps. They were built in the mountains. They carry that mountain inside them every time they go to war. So, let us begin. The land that forged the Gurkhas. The birthplace of the Gurkha warrior is not a battlefield. It is the Himalayas themselves. Life in these mountains is not merely difficult. It is a daily negotiation with nature. Villages cling to cliff sides like stubborn roots, refusing to die. Children grow up carrying loads that would make full-grown soldiers collapse. Walking for hours is not exercise, it is survival. And in winter, when icy winds sweep down from the peaks, these villages become crucibles that punish weakness and reward endurance. Before the modern idea of Nepal even existed, the people of these hills lived in scattered clans and kingdoms. Their lives were shaped by constant threats, landslides that erased entire settlements, monsoons that tore through fields, and predators that stalked the forests at night. Strength became a necessity. Courage became a normal expectation. A family's survival often depended on its young men's ability to fight raiders, defend cattle, or lead dangerous journeys through tiger-infested jungles to trade salt or grain. Generations grew up in this unforgiving environment until toughness became cultural inheritance. Every child learned to wield knives, climb sheer slopes, and track movement through the forest long before adulthood. They learned to move silently, think quickly, and confront danger head-on. These skills were not taught by armies. They were taught by geography, disaster, and the daily grind of Himalayan life. What outsiders would call training was, to these people, simply living. Carrying 40 kilograms of firewood up a mountain, normal. Traversing cliffs barefoot, daily routine. Running for miles to reach another village before nightfall, expected. The rest of the world could not imagine how these harsh conditions shaped the mind, a mind that did not fear fatigue, hunger, or danger, because these were constant companions. By the time the world discovered them, the people of the Himalayas had already been forged into warriors long before they picked up a uniform or a Khukuri. They did not become Gurkhas. They were Gurkhas. The world just didn't know it yet. The Gurkha kingdom and warrior culture. Long before the world knew the name Gurkha, a small hill kingdom was rising in the shadows of the Himalayas Gurkha. It was a harsh land of cliffs, narrow valleys, and scattered settlements ruled by a lineage of kings who believed power was earned, not through lineage alone, but through strength and conquest. The Gurkha kings encouraged bravery, rewarded military skill, and demanded absolute loyalty. In a world where survival depended on how fast a blade could be drawn, This kingdom became a magnet for clans known for ferocity and resilience. What made Gurkha unique was not just its geography, but its philosophy of warfare. Children were trained early in wrestling, archery, and the use of blades. Every festival contained some ritual of combat, mock battles, duels, or tests of endurance. Songs told of warriors who crossed mountains barefoot, carrying nothing but a goatskin water bag and a Khukuri. These stories weren't heroic exaggerations. They were memories of real men who fought real wars in impossible terrain. Gurkha society respected the warrior above all. Farmers were expected to defend their land. Shepherds sometimes became scouts who led armies through mist-filled passes. The idea of kshatriya, the warrior class, blended with Himalayan practicality. Everyone was expected to be ready to fight. Kingdom built on such values naturally expanded, absorbing neighboring territories through a mix of diplomacy, intimidation, and outright battle. This culture also created a unique code of honor. Theft was despised, cowardice was unforgivable, and betrayal was the highest sin. Warriors swore loyalty not just to their king, but to their clan and their ancestors. To die bravely was considered preferable to returning home defeated. This belief shaped the entire mindset of future Gurkha soldiers, a loyalty that foreign armies would one day revere and fear. By the time the Gurkha kingdom emerged as a rising power, its people had already developed a warrior identity unlike anything the world had seen. Fearless, disciplined, and unbreakable. When their king decided to unify Nepal, the world had no idea that a storm was about to descend from the mountains. Ancient warfare traditions of the Himalayas. The Himalayas were not simply home, they were a battlefield older than recorded history. Tribes fought over grazing land, water sources, and trade routes. These conflicts honed a style of warfare that depended on stealth, mobility, and intimate knowledge of the terrain. Ambushes from tree lines, nighttime attacks, and lightning-fast raids were common tactics long before professional armies were formed. Unlike lowland armies that relied on cavalry charges or large formations, Himalayan warriors fought like ghosts. They could vanish into forests, traverse slopes that seemed unclimbable, strike with precision using short swords, spears, bows, and later, the iconic Khukuri. Their ability to fight in fog, snow, and rain made them unpredictable and frightening to outsiders who ventured into the region. Training was embedded in daily life. Children played games that mimicked survival, running on narrow ridges, balancing on fallen trees, hunting small animals with slingshots. Teenagers often accompanied adults on expeditions into the wilderness, where they encountered bears, snow leopards, and wild boars. Every danger sharpened their instincts. By adulthood, these men were battlefield-ready without formal training. Spiritual beliefs also shaped their warrior tradition. Before going to war, many offered prayers to ancestral spirits, asking for courage and protection. Rituals honored the fallen and reminded fighters that their bloodline expected bravery. Death was not feared. It was accepted as the cost of defending honor, family, and land. These ancient traditions formed the backbone of what would later become the Gurkha identity. When the world's largest colonial empire eventually clashed with these mountain fighters, the British discovered they were not facing an untrained hill militia. They were facing warriors, sharpened by centuries of Himalayan warfare. The unification of Nepal. In the 18th century, Nepal was not a single nation, but a patchwork of dozens of rival kingdoms. Into this chaos stepped King Prithvi Narayan Shah, ruler of the small but fiercely disciplined Gurkha kingdom. His vision was clear: unite the fragmented lands into a single, powerful nation. But this vision required an army capable of defeating entrenched rulers who commanded larger territories. The Gurkha warriors rose to the challenge. Using the terrain as their greatest ally, they launched relentless mountain campaigns. They besieged fortified cities by cutting off water supplies that flowed through hidden hill channels. They ambushed armies by luring them into steep passes where their formation broke apart. Their discipline shocked their enemies. Gurkha soldiers would march for days with minimal food, climb vertical cliffs at night, and attack before dawn, striking with precision. The campaign lasted decades. Battles were bloody, others strategic, but all demanded resilience. Gurkha fighters adapted quickly, learning to fight better armed opponents, mastering new weapons, and refining military organization. Their reputation grew with each victory, and other kingdoms began to fear the name Gurkhali. By the mid-1700s, Prithvi Narayan Shah had achieved the impossible. He had unified Nepal under a central command. The warriors who secured this achievement became legendary within the region. Their courage and tactical brilliance had built a nation. But this unification would soon attract the attention of a foreign superpower one, eager to control the entire Indian subcontinent. The Gurkha soldiers did not know it yet, but their greatest test, the test that would make their name echo across the world, was about to begin. The Anglo-Nepalese War begins. When the British East India Company expanded across India, they expected to dominate every kingdom they encountered. Their armies were experienced, well-equipped, and confident. But then, they reached Nepal's borders, where Gurkha warriors controlled rugged terrain that was nearly impenetrable. Clashes over small border areas escalated quickly, and in 1814, the Anglo-Nepalese War erupted. The British anticipated a swift victory. Instead, they met an enemy unlike any they had fought. Gurkha soldiers refused to engage in open-field battles where British artillery was strongest. Instead, they fortified ridges, dug into forests, and used mountains as a fortress. Every valley became a trap. Every slope became a sniper's nest. Every night, British camps were hit with surprise attacks so ferocious that seasoned officers began warning new recruits. If you see one, Gurkha, assume there are 50 more you cannot see. This was not simply a war of guns, it was a war of psychology. The British were stunned by the speed, agility, and fearlessness of the Gurkhali fighters. These men would leap from cliffs, charge through gunfire with Khukuris, and vanish into trees before a counterattack could be mounted. British commanders rode in disbelief. They fight like tigers, they die like lions. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, Gurkha warriors resisted at every front, forcing British troops into costly uphill battles. Many British officers privately admitted that they had severely underestimated Nepal's defenders. And yet the true shock was still ahead inside a small fort called Nalapani. The Battle of Nalapani, 600 versus 35,000. Nalapani Fort was not large. It was a simple hill fortress guarded by roughly 600 Gurkha soldiers under the command of young Captain Balpadre Kunwar. Against them came a British force of nearly 35,000 troops equipped with artillery, cannons, and overwhelming supplies. By every military calculation, this should have been an easy British victory, but it was not. For weeks, the tiny garrison at Nalapani defied the might of the British Empire. Cannon fire shattered the fort walls, but the Gurkhas refused to surrender. When water sources were cut off, the defenders dug deeper. When food ran out, they ate whatever they could find. When the British advanced, the Gurkhas countercharged with Khukuris, forcing seasoned soldiers into retreat. Balbhadra Kunwar became a legend during this siege. Even when explosions tore apart parts of the fort, he rallied his men, shouting, "Better to die than live a coward." The British were stunned by the ferocity of the defense. They had never seen an enemy so unshakable, so undeterred by death. In the final hours, the British breached the walls only to find the fort empty. The Gurkhas had slipped out through a hidden path and regrouped in the jungle, refusing to be captured. The British commander reportedly saluted their bravery, saying, "If I had Gurkhas, I could conquer the world." Nalapani was a British victory on paper, but in history, it became the moment the world first understood the terrifying power of the Gurkha spirit. The Treaty of Shugoli, a respect signed in blood, the Anglo-Nepalese War ended not because the Gurkhas were defeated, they weren't, but because both sides recognized something extraordinary in the other. The British understood that conquering Nepal would cost them far more lives than they were willing to sacrifice, and the Gurkhas realized that the British war machine was relentless and technologically unmatched. Thus, in 1816, the Treaty of Shugoli was signed. On paper, Nepal lost land, but in reality, what the world gained was one of history's most unique and respected military relationships. The treaty could have been a humiliation for Nepal, but it wasn't. British officers who had fought the Gurkhas wrote reports praising their bravery in almost romantic language. Newspapers in London described the Gurkha soldiers as lion-hearted mountaineers. And the bravest men we ever faced, the British, known for subduing empires, had stumbled upon an enemy they not only respected but admired. This mutual respect would soon reshape global military history. Inside Nepal, the treaty became a symbol of sacrifice and stubborn pride. Although territory was lost, the bravery displayed at Nalapani, Hythak, and other battles became part of national identity. Mothers told their children stories of how Gurkha warriors fought without water, without supplies, without fear. The treaty marked an end to the war, but it marked the beginning of something far more enduring. The British saw something they had never seen before, an enemy who fought as fiercely in the last hour as in the first, who laughed in the face of death, who charged cannons with knives, and who treated surrender as a shame worse than dying. These qualities were not only impressive, they were exactly what the British Army wanted. The treaty was more than a diplomatic agreement, became the bridge between two nations, and the gateway that allowed the Gurkhas to go from feared enemies to the most celebrated soldiers in the British Empire. The respect earned in blood would now forge a legendary brotherhood. Recruitment begins. The birth of the Gurkha regiments. Shortly after the war, British commanders approached Nepal with an unusual offer. They wanted to recruit the very men who had nearly beaten them. It was unprecedented. Colonial armies typically forced their defeated enemies into submission, not partnership. But the British knew the truth. The Gurkhas were not ordinary fighters. They were a breed the world had rarely seen. Thus began the formation of the first Gurkha regiments, built almost entirely from former Gurkha kingdom soldiers. These men marched under a new flag, not out of submission, but because they saw the British Army as a place where their warrior skills could be sharpened, honored, and paid for with dignity. Recruitment centers were set up in the hills of Nepal, far from lowland politics. Only the toughest, most resilient, most disciplined young men would be chosen. When the first Gurkha battalions marched into British cantonments, European officers were stunned. These soldiers were short, sturdy, muscular, fearless. They laughed at long marches, shrugged off freezing nights, and treated hardship as a normal part of existence. Many British commanders admitted that these men had iron in their bones. The British military machine transformed the Gurkhas further. They received rifles, uniforms, professional training, and battlefield discipline, but they kept their Himalayan spirit, their mountain instincts, and most importantly, their Khukuri. This combination created one of the deadliest and most effective infantry units the world had ever seen. This recruitment was not merely military, it was the birth of a legend. The Gurkhas were no longer just defenders of Nepal. They were now warriors of a global empire, ready to prove their ferocity on battlefields far from home. Very soon, the world would know their name, the Khukuri, ritual, symbol, and terror. To outsiders, the Khukuri is just a curved knife. To the Gurkhas, it is identity, soul, and legacy. Forged by mountain blacksmiths, using old railway steel, meteor fragments, or remnants of ancient weapons. The Khukuri is more than a weapon, it is a companion. Every Gurkha carries it not merely as a tool of war, but as a symbol of courage, duty, and heritage. Before battle, many touched the blade to their forehead in silent prayer. Some whispered the names of ancestors. Others let the blade rest in their hand, feeling its weight as if greeting an old friend. British officers quickly learned to fear the Khukuri. Many wrote in their journals that seeing a Gurkha draw his blade was enough to terrify entire battalions. According to tradition, once drawn in battle, the blade should not be sheathed until it has tasted blood. Whether myth or ritual, the psychological impact was devastating. Enemies often surrendered at the mere sight of Gurkhas charging with Khukuris raised. Yet the Khukuri is more than an instrument of death. In the mountains, it is used for everything: cutting firewood, harvesting crops, preparing meals, carving pathways. This versatility made it the perfect battlefield weapon, allowing a Gurkha to fight with instinctive precision. The blade curves like a crescent moon, designed to strike with crushing force even in tight spaces. The Khukuri embodies the very spirit of the Gurkha. Simple, humble, but capable of extraordinary power when necessary. And as the Gurkhas began their service across the world, the legend of the Khukuri traveled with them, whispered in trenches, feared in jungles, and respected in courts of kings. The Gurkha creed: better to die than live a coward. If one sentence defines the Gurkhas, it is their creed: Kafir, Hanu, Banda, Marnu, Ramro, which means better to die than live a coward. This is not a slogan. It is a way of life, taught from childhood, embedded in culture, and reinforced by centuries of Himalayan warfare. Gurkha warriors believe that honor outlives the body. Death is temporary, shame is eternal. The creed shapes their reactions in battle. They do not retreat easily, they do not surrender, and they do not abandon their comrades. The British quickly saw the effects of this creed. Algers would charge trenches with bayonets, even when outnumbered. They would hold positions long after other units fell back. They would defend high ground until their ammunition ran out, and then switch to Khukuri. This psychological backbone made them some of the most reliable soldiers in the entire British Empire. The creed also shaped their character outside of war. Gurkhas were known for humility, discipline, and an almost spiritual calmness. They rarely boasted, rarely complained, and rarely broke formation. British officers often noted that a single Gurkha, quiet and smiling, was more intimidating than a loud, angry soldier from another regiment. To live by the creed meant accepting risk, embracing sacrifice, and believing that courage was the highest virtue a man could possess. It created a unity of purpose that no enemy, no hardship, no war could break. It was this creed that turned mountain villagers into warriors the world would never forget. Selection. The most brutal military intake on earth. Becoming a Gurkha is harder than surviving many battles. Every year, thousands of Nepali youths from villages across the Himalayas compete for a few hundred spots. The selection process is famous worldwide for its brutality. It is not designed to test fitness, it is designed to test spirit. Candidates run uphill for miles, carrying doko baskets filled with stones, sometimes weighing over 35 kilograms strapped to their heads by a rope. This is the infamous doko race, conducted on steep mountain trails. Many faint, collapse, or bleed, but they keep going because to stop is to accept failure in front of their families. The interview stage is psychological warfare. Officers look for humility, discipline, intelligence, and emotional resilience. Recruits must answer questions in English, demonstrate leadership, and prove that they will never abandon a comrade. A single moment of hesitation can mean rejection. Then comes the medical screening, which is so precise that even one minor irregularity can end a candidate's dream. The British Army wants only the strongest bodies and the sharpest minds. By the end, fewer than 3% of candidates make it through, making it statistically harder to join the Gurkhas than Harvard University, the Navy SEALs, or the SAS. Those who succeed do not walk proudly. They weep because the selection is not just a competition. It is a rite of passage that honors their ancestors and elevates their family's name. The world calls them elite soldiers, but Nepal calls them sons of the mountains, brotherhood beyond borders. The moment a man becomes a Gurkha, something extraordinary happens. He gains a family that spans nations. Gurkha brotherhood is not symbolic, it is real, lived, and practiced on every battlefield. They fight together, eat together, suffer together, and if needed, die together. This unity makes them terrifying on the front lines and unbreakable under fire. Unlike many military units built around hierarchy and distance, Gurkhas blur the lines between officer and soldier. They respect rank, but they treat each other like brothers. British officers assigned to Gurkha regiments often describe it as a life-changing honor. Many stay their entire careers because they have never seen such loyalty, kindness, and fierce protectiveness. Gurkhas also form bonds with the local communities wherever they serve. Brunei, Hong Kong, Britain, Singapore, the Middle East. Their reputation for honesty and friendliness makes them beloved. Children run to greet them, elders bless them, and even rival soldiers often admire them from afar. But the brotherhood shines brightest in war. Gurkhas have been known to risk their own lives to retrieve the bodies of fallen comrades, refusing to leave anyone behind. They share food, share danger, and share victories. No man fights alone. No man is forgotten. This is the secret to their legendary strength. Weapons age, tactics evolve, empires rise and fall. But brotherhood's the invisible force carried by every Gurkhas, what turns ordinary men into timeless warriors. Gurkhas in the British Empire Wars. When the British first deployed the newly formed Gurkha regiments across the empire, they were not entirely sure what to expect. The reputation of the hill warriors was already spreading like wildfire, but now it was time to test them across continents, climates, and enemies they had never seen. What followed was nothing short of astonishing. From the jungles of Burma to the deserts of Sudan, Gurkhas displayed not just bravery, but an almost supernatural endurance that stunned seasoned commanders. In the First and Second Anglo-Sikh Wars, the Gurkhas fought against the fearsome Khalsa army, one of the most powerful military forces in Asia. Yet even facing Sikh artillery and cavalry charges, Gurkhas held their lines, counterattacked with Khukuris drawn, and gained a reputation for being immovable in battle. British officers wrote letters home describing Gurkhas as the most reliable troops we have ever commanded. Across the empire, Malaysia, Afghanistan, Burma, and even the Caribbean, Gurkhas were deployed wherever Britain faced uprisings or resistance. Their reputation grew each time. They became known for night raids, surprise attacks, and their frightening silence. Enemies feared them because they struck fast, hard, and often without being detected until it was too late. Stories spread of Gurkhas who trekked barefoot for miles, climbed impossible cliffs, and charged fortified positions with nothing but their blades. By the late 1800s, Gurkhas were no longer just soldiers, they were legend. Wherever Britain faced danger, Gurkhas were the first sent and the last to leave. Their deeds became the backdrop for an even larger story, their role in the two greatest conflicts in human history, where their bravery would reach mythical levels. World War I. Trench warriors. When World War I erupted in 1914, the world stepped into an abyss of barbed wire, mud, and mass death. Millions of soldiers froze, starved, and suffocated in trenches stretching across Europe. Into this hellscape marched the Gurkha small men from distant mountains, carrying curved knives and calm expressions. No one expected what they were about to do. The Gurkhas quickly earned a terrifying reputation among German forces. In night raids, they would crawl across no man's land with absolute silence, infiltrate enemy lines, and eliminate machine gun nests in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Germans whispered the phrase, "The Gurkhas are here," as a warning of impending slaughter. Some trenches were abandoned at the mere rumor of their presence. At Gallipoli, they charged up cliffs under blistering fire, reaching positions that Australian and British units were unable to take. At Neuve-Chapelle, Gurkhas advanced through fields of corpses and shrapnel, clearing trenches step by bloody step. Even when outnumbered or outgunned, they never faltered. British commanders often said that if every soldier behaved like a Gurkha, the war would end in a month. Their bravery came at a terrible cost. Thousands of Gurkhas fell in France, Mesopotamia, and Turkey. Many were buried in foreign soil, far from the mountains that birthed them, yet their legacy burned brighter than ever. 2,000 gallantry awards, countless battlefield victories, and a reputation as the most feared close combat troops on the Western Front. By the end of the war, the world knew, if the Gurkhas were on the battlefield, the impossible became possible. World War II, Burma Pacific, and impossible missions. If World War I proved the Gurkhas' courage, World War II immortalized them. They were deployed in every major theater from the jungles of Myanmar to the deserts of North Africa, on the hills of Italy to the islands of Southeast Asia. But nothing defined them more than the Burma campaign, where their mountain skills and jungle instincts made them the perfect warriors. For one of the harshest battlefields in the world, against the Japanese, who were renowned for their ferocity, the Gurkhas felt perfectly matched. They excelled in ambushes, raids, and rapid assaults. Many missions were carried out in darkness, with nothing but a kukri in hand, cutting through enemy lines with terrifying efficiency. Japanese soldiers feared the Gurkhas so much that many surrendered when they learned who was approaching. In the Pacific, Gurkhas fought on steep mountain ridges, crossing rivers, marching through monsoon storms, and enduring diseases that wiped out entire battalions of other armies. Yet they continued, smiling, singing, pushing forward. Their calmness under fire became a hallmark of Allied operations. General Slim of the British 14th Army famously said, "If a man says he is not afraid of dying, he is either lying or he is a Gurkha." In Europe, Gurkhas scaled the treacherous slopes of Monte Cassino, one of the toughest battles of the entire war. They fought alongside British, Indian, Polish, and New Zealand troops, levering the Germans out of fortified positions with relentless assaults. In Italy, soldiers described seeing Gurkhas climb cliffs that had been declared unclimbable, appearing behind German lines like ghosts. By 1945, the Gurkhas had earned over 4,000 bravery awards, including Victoria Crosses, Distinguished Conduct Medals, and military crosses. No other foreign unit in British service had ever achieved such distinction. They were no longer just soldiers. They were the sharp edge of the Allied victory. The Gurkha, VCs, legends among legends. The Victoria Cross is the highest military honor in the British Empire, awarded only for extraordinary bravery performed in the presence of the enemy. It is not given lightly. Many soldiers fought for decades without seeing even a recommendation for one. Yet the Gurkhas, representing a tiny population from a small Himalayan nation, earned so many VCs that historians still marvel at it today. Names like Lachaman, Gurun, Ganesh, Bahadur Rai, Ram Bahadur, Limbu, and Kolberthapa became immortal. Their stories are almost unbelievable. Lachaman Gurun fought off 200 Japanese soldiers with one arm. After a grenade blew off his other hand, he reloaded his rifle with his teeth. Kolberthapa carried 3 wounded men through enemy fire, refusing to abandon even a captured British soldier. Ram Bahadur Limbu charged a machine gun nest alone, killing every defender before leading his section to victory. Each VC citation reads like myth, but they are fully documented historical events witnessed by officers, soldiers, and sometimes the enemy. These men embodied a kind of courage that transcended training or loyalty. It was as if something ancient, something born of their mountains, ignited in them during battle. The British government and monarchy often publicly honored the Gurkhas, calling them the bravest of the brave, a phrase that still holds true. Even today, their photos hang in regimental halls, their stories passed down to new recruits, their deeds recited in ceremonies. For the Gurkhas, bravery is not an act, is a tradition. The VC winners became more than heroes. They became the living symbols of what it means to be a Gurkha, fearless, loyal, unbreakable. Gurkhas in the Malayan emergency. In the dense jungles of Malaya, where visibility dropped to just a few meters and every shadow hid an ambush, the Gurkhas became the masters of counterinsurgency. From 1948 to 1960, they fought communist guerrillas in one of the most difficult jungle wars of the 20th century. The heat was suffocating, the snakes deadly, the terrain unforgiving, and the enemy invisible. But for the Gurkhas, this was familiar ground. Mountain jungles were their birthright. They moved silently, tracking rebels with a hunter's instinct. Many battles were fought at close range, sudden bursts of gunfire followed by hand-to-hand combat. Gurkhas excelled in small unit tactics, ambushing insurgent camps, clearing trails, and holding high-ground positions in monsoon rains. Their discipline, patience, and adaptability made them indispensable to the British campaign. Villagers often trusted Gurkhas more than local or colonial authorities. Their calm demeanor and respect for local customs won hearts, while their courage won battlefields. The rebels feared Gurkhas not only for their fighting skills, but for their relentless pursuit. They never gave up a trail, never left a mission unfinished. The Malayan emergency became one of the British Empire's few successful counterinsurgency operations, and the Gurkhas were at its core. By the time the war ended, their legend had only grown stronger. They had once again proven that terrain, climate, and fear meant little to a Gurkha soldier. Gurkhas in the Falklands War. In 1982, when Britain and Argentina clashed over the remote Falkland Islands, the Gurkhas were deployed to some of the harshest terrain and weather on Earth. Snowstorms, freezing winds, and barren landscapes became their new battlefield. Yet even here, thousands of miles from home, the Gurkhas adapted instantly. Their mountain upbringing made the cold and altitude feel familiar. Argentine soldiers feared them deeply. Intelligence reports showed that many Argentine units debated retreating upon learning Gurkhas were advancing. Some surrendered without a fight. The psychological impact of the Khukuri, more than the weapon itself, played a decisive role. The legend had spread so widely that fear alone became a strategic advantage. During the Battle of Mount William and Mount Tumbledown, Gurkhas advanced with their usual quiet precision. They flanked enemy positions, cut through minefields, and pushed up steep hills under fire. Their discipline under pressure impressed even hardened British commanders. Though the Gurkhas saw less direct combat than expected, their presence alone shaped enemy behavior and battlefield morale. The Falklands reinforced a global truth. The Gurkhas were not just warriors of mountains and jungles, they were warriors of any environment, any battlefield, any war. The cold could not stop them. The wind could not stop them. Fear certainly could not stop them. Gurkhas in Afghanistan and Iraq. In the 21st century, Gurkhas proved that their legendary status was not a relic of history. From Kabul to Basra, they served at the forefront of modern warfare, counter-terrorism, urban combat, peacekeeping, and high-risk security operations. Their adaptability stunned Allied forces who expected old-school fighters, not soldiers who excelled with drones, radios, and modern tactics. In Afghanistan's mountains, Gurkhas moved with ease, navigating ridges and valleys as naturally as if they were in Nepal. They guarded supply lines, escorted diplomats, and engaged insurgents in close-quarters firefights. Many Taliban fighters learned the hard way that the Khukuri was not just for rituals, it was lethal, silent, and terrifyingly efficient. In Iraq, Gurkhas became famous for defending key bases and embassies. Their discipline under attack, especially during suicide bombings and mortar barrages, saved countless lives. Stories spread of Gurkhas fighting off entire militant groups with minimal casualties. They gained admiration from American, British, and NATO troops alike. Modern warfare tested not just their strength, but their intelligence and tactical skill. And once again, the Gurkhas proved that no matter the century, no matter the technology, nothing could replace courage, loyalty, and precision. They were warriors born for every era, the Gurkha peacekeepers. Not all wars are fought with bullets. Many are fought with presence, with standing between chaos and civilians, between rebels and refugees, between warlords and villages. Here, too, Gurkhas earned global respect. Serving with the UN in places like Lebanon, Congo, Haiti, Timor-Leste, and Sierra Leone, they became symbols of stability and compassion. Civilians often trusted Gurkhas instantly. Their calm behavior, humility, and fairness made them beloved in regions torn apart by conflict. Children gravitated toward them. Villagers welcomed them. Even rebels often hesitated to attack Gurkhas, knowing they would respond with disciplined, overwhelming force if provoked. Their role was not just about carrying rifles, it was about building roads, protecting schools, escorting food convoys, and preventing ethnic violence. Many peacekeepers spoke of how Gurkhas diffused situations without firing a shot. Their presence alone was often enough to maintain order. In these missions, the Gurkhas showed a different kind of strength, restraint, empathy, and humanity. They proved that true warriors are not just defined by how they fight, but by how they protect. The training that breaks most men. Gurkha training is not simply a physical challenge. It is a cultural, psychological, and spiritual transformation. From the first day recruits arrive, they are plunged into a world where discipline is absolute. Expectations are brutal, and failure is the default outcome. Most of the men standing there have walked for days from remote villages to reach the training center. Many have slept in bus stations, carried sacks of rice across borders, and survived on almost no money. But nothing prepares them for what comes next. Gurkha instructors begin by gauging mental endurance. Sleep deprivation, relentless drills, complex instructions given at rapid speed, and constant pressure break down the weak. Recruits are expected to obey instantly, without hesitation or complaint. A single mistake can end their chances forever. The fear of failure weighs heavier than the physical exhaustion. Many have families who saved an entire year's income in hopes of one son joining the Gurkhas, a weight that crushes weaker minds before the training even begins. Then comes the physical testing. Days start before sunrise, long-distance runs, obstacle courses, endless push-ups, and unbearable drills become the new normal. A recruit who falls behind even slightly is dismissed with no discussion. The standards resemble elite special forces selection, yet these are only entry requirements. Recruits run with rifles, crawl under barbed wire, climb ropes until their hands bleed, and do so without complaint. And always the instructors watch, searching not for speed or strength, but for Gurkha spirit, the ability to suffer in silence. But the hardest part of training is the forging of character. Recruits learn humility, discipline, and emotional control. They are taught that a Gurkha does not brag, does not panic, does not act out of anger. He must be respectful even in battle, must remain calm even under fire. By the end of training, the boys who arrived hungry and nervous have become men capable of marching for days, fighting for hours, and smiling through pain. They have become Gurkhas warriors shaped by mountains, refined by hardship, and hardened by unbreakable will. The infamous Doko race in physical conditioning. Of all the ordeals in Gurkha training, the Doko race is the most feared, the most painful, and the most iconic. Each recruit straps a wicker basket, the Doko, onto his back. Inside it is a load weighing up to 35 kilograms of rocks or sand. The only strap supporting the weight is a rope looped around the recruit's forehead. And the race begins, a brutal uphill sprint through uneven trails, reaching up to 4 kilometers of relentless climb. Recruits collapse, vomit, cry, and sometimes faint. Only the strongest, mentally and physically, reach the finish line. The Doko race is not meant to test speed. It is designed to test spirit. The mountains of Nepal forge men who can climb, run, and endure. But the Gurkhas want more than mountain fitness. They want proof that a recruit will keep moving even when every muscle is screaming. When his lungs feel like fire, when the weight feels impossible. Instructors watch not for technique, but for heart. A recruit who refuses to quit, even if he finishes last, is valued more than one who runs fast, but breaks under pressure. Beyond the Doko race, daily physical conditioning pushes recruits to limits few soldiers on Earth ever reach. They practice unarmed combat, forced marches carrying heavy loads, swimming with full uniforms, and weapons drills performed at punishing speed. The goal is simple: to create warriors who never tire, never hesitate, and never falter. Gurkhas must be capable of charging up hills, sprinting through jungles, scaling cliffs, and fighting hand-to-hand, all in one mission. Over time, recruits develop a kind of quiet, unshakable confidence. Their bodies become lean, fast, flexible, and explosive. Their minds become resilient and focused. They learn to endure fear, pain, hunger, and uncertainty with a calm expression. When they finally pass the selection, they stand among the fittest and toughest soldiers humanity has ever produced. The Doko race becomes a memory, but also a badge of honor, a reminder that they earned their place through sweat, blood, and willpower. Gurkha values: honor, loyalty, discipline. Beyond physical strength, the true power of the Gurkhas lies in their values, ancient, deep, and unshakable. These values are not taught by instructors. They are inherited from Himalayan culture itself. Every Gurkha grows up with a sense of humility rooted in mountain life, where survival depends on cooperation and respect. When recruits arrive at training, instructors simply refine what already exists: discipline, loyalty, honor, and service. Honor is the beating heart of Gurkha identity. A Gurkha's word is sacred. If he promises to protect someone, he will die before breaking that promise. This is why Gurkhas are often chosen for the most sensitive missions: guarding embassies, protecting royalty, escorting diplomats in war zones, and operating in dangerous territories where trust is everything. Their reputation is so strong that civilians often feel safer when they see Gurkha soldiers, even in places torn apart by conflict. Loyalty is another defining characteristic. Gurkhas do not fight for money or status. They fight for their regiment, their brothers, and their honor. A Gurkha will never abandon a comrade in danger, even if it means risking his own life. This loyalty has been witnessed countless times: wounded soldiers being carried through gunfire, comrades refusing to retreat so others can escape, rescues performed under impossible circumstances. To a Gurkha, loyalty is not an option. It is duty. Discipline completes the triad. Gurkhas are known worldwide for their clean behavior, calmness, and respect. They do not show off, do not disobey orders, and do not mistreat civilians. Even enemies have written letters praising the discipline of Gurkha soldiers. They fight ferociously, but never cruelly. They are feared for their skill, not for brutality. This combination, ferocity in battle, humility in peace, is what makes them one of the most unique warrior cultures in human history. Gurkha, family life, and sacrifices. While the world sees the bravery of Gurkhas on the battlefield, few understand the sacrifices behind that bravery. Every Gurkha comes from a family that has endured hardship for generations. Many grew up farming steep mountain terraces, carrying water for kilometers, studying by candlelight, and living in quiet villages far from modern comfort. Their families invest deeply in their sons' dreams, emotionally, financially, and spiritually. When a boy is selected to join the Gurkhas, entire villages celebrate. When he is rejected, entire families grieve. Life as a Gurkha soldier demands constant sacrifice. Long deployments separate fathers from wives, children, and parents. Many Gurkhas miss births, funerals, and festivals. The mountains of Nepal are thousands of miles away from the deserts, jungles, and war zones where they serve. Communication is often limited. Some children grow up seeing their father only a few weeks each year, yet the family stands strong. They know that service is honor, and honor is legacy. The emotional burden is immense. Every Gurkha knows the risks: combat, dangerous missions, terrorist attacks, and extreme environments. Many Gurkha wives live in constant quiet worry, waiting for news from distant lands. Yet they remain pillars of strength, teaching their children the same values their fathers fight for: humility, courage, loyalty, and discipline. Despite the distance, the bond between Gurkhas and their families remains unbreakable. Soldiers often send money back home, building schools, temples, and roads. Their success lifts entire villages out of poverty. Gurkhas do not fight for themselves, they fight for their families, for their ancestors, for Nepal. Their strength comes not only from training, but from the love and pride of the people waiting for their safe return. The Gurkha police units around the world. While the world knows Gurkhas as fearsome soldiers, many countries rely on them in an entirely different way, as elite police forces entrusted with protecting cities, airports, government buildings, and critical infrastructure. In Hong Kong, Singapore, Brunei, and the UK, Gurkhas serve as some of the most disciplined, reliable, respected security professionals on earth. The Gurkha contingent in Singapore is a perfect example. Formed in 1949, this elite police unit protects politicians, guards embassies, secures airports, and responds to major crises. Their neutrality is legendary. They do not take sides in political conflicts, which makes them perfect for crowd control and riot situations. Their calmness under pressure prevents violence, and their training ensures they can end danger instantly when required. In Hong Kong, the Gurkha police served for decades as the backbone of colonial Lira law enforcement. They patrolled dangerous neighborhoods, guarded borders, and fought organized crime. Even after the handover to China, their legacy remains deeply respected. Older citizens still speak of Gurkha officers with admiration, describing them as fair, honest, and incorruptible. In the UK, Gurkhas guard royal residences, military facilities, and diplomatic buildings. Their professionalism makes them ideal for high-security duties. When international terrorism surged in the 2000s, Gurkha-trained units were among the most trusted personnel deployed to protect key sites. These police roles demonstrate a profound truth. Gurkhas are not only warriors built for battle, they are guardians trusted with peace, order, and public safety. Whether carrying a rifle in Afghanistan or a baton in Singapore, their discipline and character remain the same. Gurkhas and SAS, brothers in shadow. The Gurkhas and the British SAS stand as two pillars of elite warfare, often serving side by side, yet forged from entirely different traditions. The SAS was born from stealth, desert warfare. In sabotage, a unit specializing in infiltration, long-range missions, and intelligence. The Gurkhas, by contrast, were shaped by mountains, close combat, and relentless endurance. When the SAS needs men capable of navigating impossible terrain, moving fast and fighting with absolute calm under pressure, they look to Gurkhas to fill their ranks. Many Gurkhas serve within the SAS itself, known as the legendary Gurkha Troop, where even elite British soldiers consider them irreplaceable. Despite their differences, the two share a unique bond built on mutual respect. Operators admire the Gurkhas' humility, loyalty, and terrifying effectiveness in close-quarters combat. Gurkhas admire the SAS for their precision, strategy, and mastery of unconventional warfare. In joint missions across the Middle East and Southeast Asia, SAS teams often relied on Gurkhas to navigate jungles, track enemies, and engage in silent close combat that few others from the West could perform. In many ways, the Gurkhas complement the SAS. The SAS brings advanced technology, intelligence, and surgical precision. The Gurkhas bring raw endurance, deep combat instincts, and an unbreakable moral code. Together, they form one of the most deadly combinations in military history. British officers often remark, "Where the SAS goes, the Gurkhas walk without fear." That single line captures the relationship perfectly to elite forces, equal in courage, different in method, united in mission. The question of who is better misses the point entirely. Each excels in its own domain. The SAS is the scalpel. The Gurkhas are the hammer that never breaks. And when the hammer and scalpel strike together, the outcome is inevitable. Mission success against any enemy, anywhere on Earth. Gurkhas and U.S. Marines. Two different worlds of war. On the surface, the Gurkhas and the United States Marines appear to serve similar roles, frontline infantry with a fierce reputation. But when you dig deeper, the differences become striking. The U.S. Marines are a vast, technologically powerful, amphibious fighting force built on firepower, logistics, and overwhelming strength. A Marine is supported by aircraft carriers, tanks, jets, artillery, and a global military empire. A Gurkha, by contrast, is often deployed in small teams, navigating terrain with minimal support, fighting with a discipline and humility that has been honed by generations of hardship. Yet when Marines train with Gurkhas, one reaction is universal: shock. Marines known for being tough discover a completely different level of endurance and mental resilience in the Gurkhas. Stories abound of Marines collapsing during mountain marches while Gurkhas move effortlessly. Marine drill instructors have praised the Gurkhas' calmness under live fire, describing them as quiet professionals who fight like ghosts. The respect is mutual. Gurkhas admire the Marines' massive scale, firepower, and brotherhood. Where the Marine Corps depends on coordinated assault, the Gurkhas depend on adaptability and instinct. A Marine attack is thunderous, overwhelming, and devastating. A Gurkha engagement is fast, silent, and surgical, often happening before the enemy even realizes they're under attack. Marines bring shock and awe. Gurkhas bring stealth and precision. In a hypothetical head-to-head matchup, neither is better. They simply fight according to entirely different cultures and doctrines. But in combined operations from Afghanistan to UN missions, Marines frequently praise the Gurkhas as among the toughest allies they have ever worked with. One American commander famously said, "If I had a battalion of Gurkhas, I'd take any hill, anywhere in the world." Such statements are not flattery, they are earned. Gurkhas and Russian Spetsnaz. Ferocity meets ferocity. Russian Spetsnaz units are among the most feared special forces in the world. It's famous for brutal training, psychological warfare, and a willingness to embrace extreme violence. They represent the cold, hard, unforgiving spirit of Russian military doctrine. Gurkhas, however, come from an entirely different tradition, a tradition of honor, restraint, and controlled ferocity. When these two warrior cultures are compared, we see a fascinating clash of philosophies, rather than a simple contest of skill. Spetsnaz trains for intimidation, shock tactics, and raw aggression. They want the enemy to feel fear long before the battle even begins. The Gurkhas don't intimidate, they simply act. Their calmness is what terrifies enemies. Spetsnaz soldiers shout, break bricks, and perform aggressive drills designed to overwhelm psychologically. Gurkhas remain silent, smiling politely before unleashing unmatched close combat precision with the Khukuri. In mountainous or jungle warfare, the advantage leans heavily toward the Gurkhas. In Arctic or urban warfare, Spetsnaz may have the edge. But what truly separates them is moral code. Spetsnaz is shaped by ruthless pragmatism, victory at any cost. Gurkhas are shaped by loyalty, discipline, and deep cultural honor. Even enemies have recorded admiration for Gurkha fairness, something few have ever said of Russian special forces. If these two elite forces ever fought, the outcome would depend entirely on the environment. But one fact stands out. Spetsnaz soldiers who have encountered Gurkhas in multinational operations often admit, reluctantly, that the Gurkhas fight with a level of fearlessness they rarely see anywhere else. When ferocity meets ferocity, the one with discipline usually wins. Discipline is where Gurkhas have no equal. Why Gurkhas terrify opponents, the psychology of fear. Throughout history, enemies of the Gurkhas have reported a unique kind of fear. Not the fear of numbers, or technology, or artillery, but of the men themselves. This fear comes from several factors that combine into something deeply psychological, almost mythical. First, there is the Khukuri, a curved blade so iconic, so deadly, and so perfectly designed for close combat that the mere sight of it can break an enemy's morale. But it is not the weapon alone, it is the way Gurkhas use it, silently, decisively, without hesitation. In battle, their calmness is terrifying. Gunfire erupts everywhere. Explosions shake the earth. Men scream, yet Gurkhas move like shadows, steady and unflinching. Second is their reputation. Stories of Gurkha bravery are told across continents. Soldiers holding positions even when outnumbered, charging through gunfire, fighting on despite severe wounds, refusing to surrender. Enemy forces often hear these stories long before they ever see a Gurkha. Fear begins before the battle even starts. Third is their physical and mental resilience. Gurkhas fight where others give up. High mountains, dense jungles, brutal climates. They push their bodies and minds far beyond normal limits. This makes opponents feel inferior before combat even begins. Psychological warfare is unintentional but devastatingly effective. Finally, it is their quiet humanity. Unlike many feared warrior groups in history, Gurkhas are polite, respectful, and humble. Enemies expect cruelty from fierce fighters, but Gurkhas give compassion after battle. It creates a paradox: men who smile gently and fight like demons. That contradiction confuses enemies, shatters assumptions, and deepens the fear of facing them again. The global legacy: why Gurkhas will never be forgotten. The legacy of the Gurkhas is not measured in the number of wars they fought or the medals they earned. It is measured in the way generations across the world speak of them with awe, respect, and gratitude. They have fought in nearly every major conflict for over 200 years, serving empires and nations far from their own homeland. Yet they remained rooted in Nepalese culture, values, and honor. Their legacy is built on sacrifice. Tens of thousands of Gurkhas died in wars that were not their own. Their blood lies in the fields of France, the jungles of Burma, the deserts of Iraq, the mountains of Afghanistan. They fought not for conquest, but because they were trusted, and they never betrayed that trust. It is built on discipline and humanity. Gurkhas represent a rare balance in military history. Warriors of unmatched ferocity who remain gentle, humble, and respectful off the battlefield. They remind the world that true strength does not require cruelty. True courage does not require arrogance. True warriors fight with honor, and it is built on brotherhood. Gurkhas form bonds that last lifetimes, and their regiments become families larger than blood. When a Gurkha dies, he is mourned not just by his comrades, but by entire communities around the world. Today, their legacy lives on in museums, history books, in military academies, in the memories of those they saved, and in the hearts of the people of Nepal. The world changes, empires fall, wars end, but the legend of the Gurkhas endures. Because legends are not created by stories, they're created by men who embody something timeless. As history closes its pages on war after war, dynasty after dynasty, empire after empire, one truth echoes across the centuries: courage is not born from power, it is born from spirit. And no warriors have ever carried a stronger spirit than the Gurkhas. From the cliffs of Nalapani to the trenches of Europe, from the jungles of Burma to the mountains of Afghanistan, they proved again and again that fear is powerless against discipline, that strength is meaningless without loyalty, and that a soldier's worth is measured not by the size of his army, but by the size of his heart. The world often forgets its heroes. But the Gurkhas, the world will never forget them, because their legacy isn't just carved into history, it is carved into every soldier they fought beside, every enemy who spoke their name in fear, and every person who heard the stories of men who would rather die than live a coward. And as long as there are mountains in Nepal, as long as the Khukuri is passed from one generation to the next, the legend of the Gurkhas will march on. If this journey through the life, courage, and legacy of the Gurkhas moved you, then don't let their story fade. Hit Lee to honor these incredible warriors. Subscribe for more deep historical documentaries. Comment below: which Gurkha story shocked you the most? And share this video because the world should know who the Gurkhas truly are. This isn't just history. This is the story of the bravest warriors ever to walk the earth, and their legend deserves to be heard.